There is no textbook for where we're going, and we'll have to experiment. It really depends on how you use it.
We are going social in public. From Government Technology Magazine, this is the GovTech Socialcast, a regular conversation with the leaders and doers of social media in state and local government. We're delighted you're here. Off the top, Dr. David A. Bray, the Eisenhower Fellow at Harvard, who has a day job at the FCC. He is all about getting real stuff done and thinks social media can help. Also on tap, emotions, rumors, and taking public conversations private on Facebook. The regulars are all here: Anil from Archive Social, Dustin from eRepublic Labs. I'm Paul from Government Technology and GovTech.com. Forbes calls Dr. David A. Bray the most social CIO in the federal government. Bray is that and more: an Eisenhower Fellow, visiting executive in residence at Harvard University, and the CIO at the Federal Communications Commission. In a wide-ranging conversation, Bray talked us through a number of things he's been learning about being social, about being an executive, about careful social listening, and about making change happen.
You've been named as one of the most social CIOs by Forbes, and if I understand correctly, you only created your Twitter account 2 years ago. So what triggered that decision, and why, from your perspective, is social media so important to your current role?
So it was very important when I arrived to begin to listen and learn from the public and the different FCC stakeholders. When I arrived at the FCC, one of the things as I listened and learned was that the average person had been at the FCC for 15 and a half years. The average contractor had been at the FCC for 19 years, so even longer than the actual government professionals. And our stakeholders have been using the same systems. Again, I mentioned that some of the systems are more than 10 years old. Some of our stakeholders have been using the same web-based systems since the late 1990s, early 2000 period. And so woe be it unto me as a senior executive and CIO if I don't take the time to listen from the public and the different stakeholders associated with different systems before I begin to try and launch the transformation that we were doing. And so it was very intentional on my part to be social and actually say I have a lot to listen and learn. I know I'm going to have blind spots. There's a wonderful article from Harvard Business Review that says, in praise of incomplete leaders, that the best leaders actually admit they have blind spots and are open to learn. And actually that's the best type of leadership to move forward. And so that's why I became social. You are right that 2 years ago I had never actually been on social media. Part of it was past jobs I had really didn't encourage that. And so for me it was really a chance to see if, one, as a public service executive, I could really embody what it meant to be as a public service executive, which was accessible to the public.
Now being kind of an active social media user and really an expert on social media, where does it fit, or where do you see it playing a role for state and local government in these new times?
I think social media, I think, is applicable to all levels of government, local, state, and federal. In fact, I've had several tweet chats or conversations online with both the San Francisco and Palo Alto CIO, as well as CIOs of some other counties on the East Coast. And so it's fun to actually share insights and experiences. I think at the local level in particular, there is the opportunity to do rapid experiments where you can see the results quite immediately because it is at the local level, and it actually is where the impact eventually occurs at the local level as opposed to the federal level. I sometimes joke, we're going to make the server lift we did, which I think was good in terms of saving money for the taxpayers and being more effective, but in terms of how it's going to impact people's local lives, it'll happen once you use one of our new modernized systems, such as the Consumer Help Desk, and it's easier to actually log whatever concern you have, and it gets done faster. But that's sort of more long-term, whereas at the local level, you can do things involving either transportation, energy efficiency, things that you can actually see more measurable immediate returns. And so in some respects, local level are doing experiments that the federal level can learn from, and equally at the federal level, we're doing some interesting things that can also be shared with the local and state level as well. And that social media allows us to have those conversations both amongst the different professionals at the state, local, and federal levels, and at the same time allows the public to chime in too and provide their insights as well. And I'm a big believer that a diversity of inputs, in fact, when I went to go get my PhD, one of the things I was trying to show was if you have a diversity of insights, however, if you also have shared goals, those two things combined, shared goals with a diversity of insights, you'll actually get better performance outcomes.
How are you now approaching social media within the FCC? Are you encouraging other staff members to represent the agency, and what kind of policies and procedures have you put in place to govern that type of usage?
Informally, and I would say this is very much informally amongst the IT team. One thing that I started doing on fairly early was recognizing the team when they did something really great on social media. I thought it was actually a good way to sort of, one, highlight that they did a good job, and two, I can't necessarily give out massive bonuses. In fact, we don't have bonuses in public service, but sometimes even an intangible recognition that you did something that was above and beyond the call of duty, that itself can be very meaningful to the individuals. And so since then, we've seen more and more folks associated with the FCC IT team have personal accounts on Twitter. And actually about 3 months ago, I actually took the time and recognized each one of what I would call change agents. I talk about positive change agents, and essentially a change agent is an individual that has been given some autonomy within a scope of some effort to make change as they see fit, and sort of select, they'll actually bring me ideas as if they were pitching ideas to a venture capitalist. I'll listen to them. I'll say, okay, give me 3 reasons why we should do this. Give me 3 reasons why we shouldn't. And for those 3 reasons why we shouldn't do it, do you have ways of mitigating it or overcoming those obstacles? And if they can answer those questions, then I invest in them like a venture capitalist, and I actually serve as what I call their human flak jacket, that I'm willing to actually take any flak that comes their way as they try to make the changes. And so on social media recently, I actually took the time to acknowledge and thank the different change agents for the things they were doing one by one with a different image. And actually, we began to do a numbering system, much like secret agents, where we had change agent 007, change agent 008, change agent 009, and their names. And I think that really, one, brings a sense of fun, if not joy, to the workplace. I think that's important. And two, it's using social media to actually recognize that there is a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that if you don't take the time to thank and recognize, people may never know about.
So I know that there's a lot of people that are out there that have suggested that social media, at least by itself, is, kind of, quote, engagement light. Do you think that's a fair critique? Do you think that agencies aren't using social media to the fullest extent to engage citizens? And if so, how do we change that for the better?
So in my personal opinion, and these would be mine as a Eisenhower Fellow, I think that social media can be engagement 100%, and it can also be engagement light. It really depends on how you use it. If you use social media solely to push out messages and you don't respond to people that have conversations or things like that, then it is engagement light because it's just one way and it's just pushing out your message. If, however, people are replying or even people are sending ideas your way and you can actually have a conversation with them, even if it's not in your actual scope or your authority to do anything, I often get comments about maybe policy issues at the FCC. And I'm like, well, I'm not a congressionally appointed commissioner. I'm nonpartisan, so I don't get to weigh in on those things, but thank you very much for your feedback. At least you can actually have that conversation back and forth, and it is actually, in my opinion, real engagement. It's maybe not as deep as it would be if it was face-to-face, but the reality is there's only 24 hours in the day, and if I tried to meet with everyone face-to-face, then I probably wouldn't be doing my actual job as a chief information officer. However, if you do use social media for those actual interactive learning experiences on both sides, and actually engagement in that sense, I think it can be truly engagement fully as opposed to just pushing your message out there. And so it raises this larger question that I think is worth asking that I don't have the answers to, which is how can we use social media to reinforce representative democracy and the democratic processes, the work of doing democracy that is so important, and at the same time make sure that everything isn't boiled down to a 5-second soundbite, and equally that we're not becoming polarized or becoming sort of stylos of the same views, echo chambers. And instead, we really need to think about how do we, as a society that wants different views, that actually the whole point of our representative democracy is it does involve compromise. It does involve working across the aisles. Can we use social media for that purpose to actually allow people to have discussions about where they want to go?
You can find him in a number of spots. On Twitter at FCC_CIO, David A. Bray on LinkedIn, and David Bray on Medium.